Get started is a couple of comments that Mike made this morning. All professional people do not wear button-down collars. I don't wear button-down collars. So we'll take care of that real quick. He also spoke about long sleeve shirts and short sleeve shirts and this sort of thing. Well, I came out of a corporate environment, and I remember back in the days when I was just a young engineer just out of college. We weren't practicing energy conservation per se, but as we get into this now and we think of dresses and this sort of thing, I remember we were all of young engineers were in one big room, sitting at our drafting tables and doing our work. And we all, as Mike said, had on long sleeve shirts, ties, and we used to sit there and get, uncomfortable as spring and summer would come along. And then one morning, nobody ever knew when it was going to happen, but our boss would come in and he'd have a short sleeve shirt on. So that was a signal that the next day everybody could wear short sleeve shirts, and you would see, just a mass changeover of everybody going from long sleeve to a short sleeve. And then we would reverse that in the fall. So even though we didn't have it addressed as energy conservation, why we're practicing energy conservation. I'll go through this a little bit up here, but we talk about, and I'll be looking at a couple of formulas here. But my undergraduate work was in civil engineering, and although in my postgraduate work I branched off. But I always think of when we talk about all of these, mechanical engineer and all this. Well, I used to tell all my young engineers, I said, you can be any kind of an engineer you want. You only need to know three things. If you want to be an electrical engineer, and I'll put this down later, but okay. If you want to be an electrical engineer, all you have to know is I is equal to E over R. Everything emanates from that. That's, your current is equal to your voltage divided by your resistance. So that makes you an electrical engineer. If you want to be a mechanical engineer, as Ed put up, all you have to know is Q is equal to MC delta T. Where your BTU load is equal to mass times your specific heat times the delta T. So that makes you a mechanical engineer. If you want to be a structural engineer, all you have to know is S is equal to MC over I. And that's where the stress in any member is equal to this. This comes out to be what they call a section modulus of a beam or something, which is your moment of inertia divided by your centroid distance. So these are all if you know those three equations, well, just mark them down. And anytime somebody says what are you, why you just pick out the type of engineer that you want to be. And Ed and I used to work together out at Rockwell here in Tulsa a few years ago. I used to give him this this little dissertation all the time out there. What I want to talk to you about today is about electrical power. And electrical power is very important in our municipalities because we will find out that electrical power will account for about 95% of your utility costs. Now that's a lot of money, but that's what we found out as we went through Enid and Okmulgee and Ada. So this is something that really is very important, and you need to be concerned about. When we talk about when we talk about electrical power, well, it's kind of, if you think of a transportation system, you have a source over here, you have a power station over here, a power station where you're making your electricity, and that's coming out and that's being carried through some sort of a transportation system over to the customer. This is usually at some elevated, of course, voltage. Come through a transformer, and then you come down to your consumer, whatever it might be. Well, we have losses in making our product, in making our current. We have losses through our transportation system. We have losses in our transformers. Transformers, much like, you know, if you're driving an automobile, you turn that automobile off, you're not using any power. But if you're sitting there idling, you're using power. You have losses. You're using energy. That's the same way with these transformers. If they're sitting up there, they're kind of like they're idling, so they're actually using power. We have losses in our line. We have losses in our transformers. We come on over into our buildings. We have additional losses. Somebody has to pay for all that. The utility company is not just selling you a product and saying, you know, it costs us this much to make it over here, and that's what we're going to cost you. They have to recoup the cost for producing all this, for the losses that they're incurring here, for putting up all of those installations. You know, it's very expensive to put up your transportation systems, your poles, your wires, and all this sort of thing. So somebody has to pay for that, and that somebody is you and I, or the municipality. If we look at our, you notice I put the Ohm's law up there, so that automatically, you know, qualifies me as an electrical engineer. And where our current is indicated by I, our voltage is E, and our R is our resistance in ohms.
Charles, you might just let them know that this is in the manual.
Yeah, it is in the manual.
Okay.
Yes, it's behind. It's not in the manual, but it's what I added this morning. It's under non-building energy systems, and there is an article there called electrical power, and I will be following that pretty close. We have now we have also electrical energy, and our electrical energy is equal to our power times the time duration, and where our power is in watts, and our power is for just alternating current, 120 volt is your voltage times your current. If we're getting into higher phase voltages, then we have to add a cosine theta on here, which then transforms it into a different type of power. We have our time, which is our duration. And so as we look at these things, and we're concerned about conserving our electrical energy, and when we do that, we think, well, if we reduce our power, by now we're reducing, you know, our electric energy requirements. Well, we are. But we also see we have another very important thing here, and that's our duration. So we not only want to be concerned with the power that we're going to conserve, but we want to be concerned with the duration or the time that we're using this. To get a lot of our equivalencies, we convert everything back to BTUs, and of course this gives us the 1 watt is equivalent to 3.413 BTU, or but a more common term we talk about is 1 kW, or 1 kilowatt is equal to 3,413 BTUs. You will find as we work with you and do the analogies of your electrical use, while we will be, you know, converting everything back to a common denominator, which is our BTU. This lets us add up our gas usage, our electric usage, all of our different usages if we have one common factor, and bring it back to BTU. I said this is in your book, and it is. It's not really in this, you know, these overviews are not in your book, but the data is in your book. If we look at what we have, we'll find out that we are charged on our electrical bills. We'll find several different things. We'll find energy, we'll find fuel adjustment, customer related charges, demand charges, low power low power factor taxes and surcharges and all this sort of thing. Energy, most of it will appear on our electrical rate schedules as a sliding block scale. They'll charge you, you'll have a customer-related charge probably where you're going to pay so much regardless if you're using power at all. And then they'll have your energy block scale whereby they will show you pay so much for the first 1,000 kW and then so much for the next one, and it's what we call a sliding block approach. Theoretically, it should work that the more you use, the less it costs you. That's not always true, but that's the approach that they use. Fuel adjustment, and we will have later, I have some overviews of electrical rates, and we will go over those electrical rates and try to pick out some of these things. The fuel adjustment, you'll find that is usually identified on your bill. This can be either a plus, it will either add to your bill or deduct from your bill. You'll notice, and I'll show you that a little later, sometimes your fuel adjustment will be so much per kW, same thing on your gas bill, so much per MCF. It may be added to your bill, may be deducted from your bill. So this can go up depending upon what the utility company is happy to pay for the fuel that they get to operate their facility. We have the customer-related charge. This is where the utility company says that you as a customer have to pay your fair share of this transportation network. This is normally one lump sum where they have calculated it out and through the power companies' mysterious ways have come up with this particular number. Sometimes they don't show it as a separate item on your utility bill, but it will be included in your energy charge. They will just, when they put their energy charge down, they will just incorporate what they call the customer-related factors into that. And then we have the demand. And this is a word that's kicked around, you know, when we get into electric rates and this sort of thing, where everybody's talking about the demand and the demand rate and all this sort of thing. Well, very simply, the demand is something that the utility company assesses the customer for his fair share of the utility's fixed investment in equipment to meet maximum requirements of the user. And we will get into that a little bit later as to how they actually arrive at these particular demand charges. But in essence, they are saying to you as a customer, if we are going to have this facility here, we are going to have all the power necessary to supply and meet your requirements, then you have to pay us for that. We have another item in here called power factor, and we'll get into the derivation of the power factor a little bit later. But in essence, you're going to have power factor in any type of inductive device that you have, motors, all this sort of thing, your fluorescent fixtures, you have an inductive load in the ballast in your fluorescent fixtures. All of these things can contribute to your power factor. Again, we'll get into how we derive that a little bit later, but right now, all I want you to be aware of is that if you normally have a power factor and you are being charged on the demand, that you will be penalized for a power factor that falls below normally 8/10 to 9/10. Then we have on our utility bill, we'll have our taxes. You know, those, so we always have to get those on there. Any surcharge that they might have, and then anything else that the utility company can justifiably include on their bill. So these are the things that we will find on our
Is that power factor figured in like on pumps and motors when they start up electronically?
Well,
That's what that
yeah. Well, now just real briefly, and we'll get into this a little bit later. But any type of current you have particularly on an inductive type motor, is that your power has two components in it. And you have one component over here which is measured in kW. That is your real useful power. That's what you're getting out. Now, you have to have, for any type of inductive motor, you have to have what they call a reactive power. And this reactive power produces a magnetic field so that the current will be able to flow through the coil on a transformer, be able to jump the gap in an induction motor. If you don't have that reactive power, it won't operate. But that's not something that they can charge you for. That is not metered, as is your real power here. Now it can be metered, but it normally is not. But they call this your reactive power or your kVAR. You'll see that. And if this is on your bill, it would be so identified as that. Now, due to the phasing of current and voltage, we cannot just arithmetically add these. In other words, they don't just add, A and B and you get C. We have to add these vectorially. And when we do that, we come down, we get right here, and this is what we call the apparent power. Now, the apparent power is measured in kVA. Now, this right here is what the utility company would like to charge you for. They would like to say, okay, you use so much real power, you have to have so much reactive power, that gives you the apparent power, that's what we'd like to charge you for. But they realistically, they can't do that. So they come to devise what they call a power factor, which is this angle right here, and we'll call that theta or anything less than that. Then if we look at this, and the cosine theta, which is your power factor, is equal to the cosine laws of the cosine being the adjacent, which is your real power, divided by your apparent power. That becomes your power factor. It would be great if this could be 1, but we can't, it don't work that way. So the power company says, okay, we will make this, we will set some value here, and it probably 8/10 to 9/10. If you get less than this, now our reactive power is so much more that we're going to penalize you for that. And so there will be a penalty on your electric bill for that. That's kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Kind of? Okay. All right. If we look at demand, our demand load is the average load in kilowatts that the electric utility must provide during a fixed time period, which is usually about 15 to 30 minutes to 60 minutes. It can vary. This is our demand. And this is saying, what they're saying is it's like if you got a car driving down the road at 50 miles an hour for 15 minutes. And then you slow that down to 40 miles per hour for 15 minutes. Well, then your average for that half hour is 45 miles per hour. That would be your demand. And that is what they would base their electric bill on. You get over that, you're going to pay a penalty. And this is something that's since this is kind of interesting. This is not something real new, but back in 1892, when utility companies were really getting in gear, they recognized the need that they have to charge your electric bill on 2 factors, and that is your actual consumption of your energy, which is we got over here apparent power, and the demand upon the system resulting from the customer's connected load. So we have to pay pay for that, that particular part. The actual consumption, as I said, normally a utility company, if you look at their power plant, probably this power plant that we have back here will not be operating at maximum capacity more than 5% of the year, 5 to 8%. That's historical data. So, but they have to have that capacity there to be able to work if they have to. So they have to charge us money for that. Usually the power plant is overloaded, occasionally during that 5% of the time, or it's probably underutilized, which is what it is most of the time. We also will find that we may have what they call a ratchet or a carry forward clause on our contract. And that's that the utilities must have the adequate capacity for peaks that may be more than 25% of the off month requirements. And on your utility bills, you'll find that most of them are broken down into two separate periods, one in the summertime, one in the wintertime. And they will have looking at your particular facility, why you may have a ratchet clause in there because you may be using more than 25% of what, at times, of what that normal demand is. And you have to be real careful because of course, in most of your municipalities, you won't get into this, but when I was with Rockwell, we had very large manufacturing plants. And we would get into this problem very often. And the ratchet or carryover clause would be a very severe penalty. And it would be either the highest month that we had or a percentage of that highest month. And when they assess that penalty on you, they run it for you the next 11 months. So you can really hurt yourself by mismanaging your electrical usage in that 1 month. Municipalities, we don't get into that as we would otherwise. Continuing on our demand, we could have another what we call alternative demand clauses. Sometimes those are time of day clauses. Your utility contracts will give you a break on your demand charges if you can reschedule your operations so that you can operate more during their off time day. If you can, operate some big motors late of a night or something like this. We had out at Rockwell here in Tulsa, we had 3 large engines, and or 3 large motors, and we would schedule those so that they were not all operating at the same time. Of course, sometimes you run into restrictions on production and this sort of thing where that's not feasible. We look at our demand load, we find out that we classify those as constant loads and variable loads. Constant loads would be lighting, heating and cooling, that sort of thing. Things that operate on a pretty constant basis. Our variable loads, we would have uncontrollable and controllable loads. We have our uncontrollable loads would be something in a production facility or manufacturing plant where regardless of what's going to do to your demand, you just have to have it on at that time. Those are uncontrollable loads. We do have controllable loads, and some of those things that I just thought of as hot water heaters. We can control. We can control those. If we want to shut them off of the night, we can shut them off, and we can control them a little bit. Air handlers, refrigeration. Ed and Mike might not agree with me, but if you have a refrigeration unit, air conditioning unit that is calling for temperature change or something like that, to me, if we delay it, 5 or 10 minutes, while you may get some irate people, but if you're real lucky, you can pacify them a little bit. at the same time help out on your electrical bill. So our demand load is the sum of the constant, uncontrollable, and controllable loads. All of those things at one particular instrument. And again, our demand charge is based upon some fixed time period. That most of the utility companies will use a 30-minute time period, but there are exceptions to that. The power factor, we kind of went through that over here a little bit. But just again, every inductive device, motors, transformers, fluorescent lamp ballasts, etc., has one or more magnetic coils on it. We have our real power right here. We have our reactive power. And we have the apparent power. And as I said, the power factor is the cosine of this angle. I don't have it on here, but the cosine of this angle, which is your real power divided by your apparent power. And I realize that, we're going through this pretty fast, and, if any of you want to go in a little more detail later, why, we'll be glad to talk to you. If we look at some typical power factors, we'll find out that our incandescent lamps, our electric resistance heaters, therefore we don't have that inductive motor, we don't have that inductive load on them, and they're great. They have a power factor of 1. And of course, somebody's going to say, when we talk about lighting later on, they're going to say, well, incandescents, are great. They have a power factor of 1. Why aren't they so great? We'll go into that later on. Our fluorescent lamps have a power factor of 8/10 to 9/10 with a high power factor ballast. Well, you can get fluorescent lamps with a low power factor ballast, and there, you have a power factor of 5/10 to 6/10. Induction motors, fully loaded, are running you 8 to 9/10 power factor. There's something interesting. Our induction motor is 25% loaded. And look at the power factor that we're doing here, 4/10 to 6/10. How many motors do we have in your facilities or in your plants that, you're running partially loaded? It's really penalizing you. You have a motor, and I understand the reasoning why, but you have a motor on some piece of equipment and it goes bad. You go out and find another motor, it's in the shed, it's not being used, so you put that on. We understand that, but when you do that and then run these motors as partially loaded, you do have a very inefficient power factor. A typical residence will run a power factor of about 9/10 to 1/10, and this is again because we're using a lot of incandescent lights within our homes. We've not converted and made those changes. So we're running a very good power factor. Again, commercial and industrial buildings, your institutional buildings will run a good power factor, 8 to 9/10. Industrial plants, now where we're getting into a lot of induction motors and this sort of thing, within those plants, running them partially loaded, large motors and this sort of thing, you can see we have a very wide dispersion of power factors. Again, our power factor penalty is normally anything below 9/10, normally 8 to 9/10, you're going to pay a penalty for that.
Is that a very significant penalty?
Varies upon the type of contract that you have. It can be. And again, a little bit later, we'll get into the many types of contracts. You'll be surprised how many rate schedules that are available to you as a municipality. But it can be, yes, it can be very significant. But one thing you need to remember is that look at your utility contract if you do have a power factor penalty clause on it. and correct your power factor only to the point that it'll bring you down to eliminate that penalty. If you've got a power factor, say you have a power factor penalty below 9/10, and you're running, 8500s or something, then correct your power factor to bring yourself up to 9/10, because it's not going to do you a lot of good as far as your power factor to try to increase that up to 1 or something like that. The cost is going to be prohibitive to you. And of course, a lot of times what we'll do is, we will install, there's different ways of doing it, but you install capacitors at your motors and this sort of thing.
If you had an inductive motor that's running in full load versus an inductive motor that's running at 25% load, which one's using the most electricity? The one with the full load?
Yeah. But you're not. See, you're coming over here, and you've got the power factor. That's what you're saying. But to do that, if you're running a full load, you're probably using more power, using more real power.
Get charged more for the one with the lower power factor.
But yeah, but your penalty is probably going to offset. And again, it depends upon the contract or the rate schedule that you're operating upon. And this is very important. And when we get into working with you, we will want all of your rate schedules. If you're working, if you have working with PSO, we would like to get your rate schedules so that we can look at them. We can look at your bills, we can see, working with you, see what schedule you're on, and is that the most advantageous schedule for you to be on. If you're on OG&E or whomever you're on, that's one reason. Not only do we want your utility bills to get what you're using in the way of power or energy, but also to look at your rate schedules and to make sure that you are on the most advantageous rate schedule. Now, you can call in, usually the utility reps, they will come in and you have to ask them. I mean, the guy's not going to appear at your door, and he's going to say, boy, let me give you this better rate schedule right here. It's not going to happen. But if you call him in and say, what are my options? Depending upon the KW that I use and all this sort of thing, then normally, and I say normally, I'll probably say 99% of the time, they will work with you and try to help you out to get on the most.
Is this power factor figured in on the startup of motors, or is it just the constant?
Oh, it's running, yeah.
I've heard that you could get a cheaper rate by putting electronic controls that start the motors up real slow, instead of that surcharge at first, that you put in on the test. And I was wondering.
That could be.
I was wondering if this had anything to do with that. It's just a constant load.
Because you still have that. You've got that reactive power that has to be there for that induction motor to run. But again, the utility companies will not come in and help you, correct the power factor or anything else. It's up to you as the customer to request this. They're not good guys in white hats roaming around, trying to save you money. If you request it, then they will usually help you. And that's, when you look at your rate structures, there are many, many rate structures put out by each utility company. And you need to ask each one, ask for each rate, for each building you have. Is this an appropriate rate? Is the bill computed correctly? We're in the computer age, and we get a bill and it says we owe X amount of dollars. We say, well, that's done by the computer, must be correct. Well, that's not always true. Look at your bills. If you just do it on a spot basis, run some manual calculations on them. You've got your schedule. You know what you should be paying for your particular KW. Run some manual calculations on it. Do spot checks. because they do make errors.
Right. I just mentioned to them what Steve Brooks, City of Enid, told us that they discovered an error in the building with a tin wall of $300,000.
Yeah.
And then there's that other person who goes around next to the levee, he's basically costing, I'm sure he's not the only one, but he'll come in and he'll check the utility bills for you, and if he finds anything wrong, bill's wrong or otherwise, he splits it 50/50. So if that's not an incentive to check your own billing, the guy's making his livelihood doing this.
That's $300,000 a year?
I think it was over a 2-year
Yeah, it was
period.
over a 2 or 3 year
That's good. Much money
period.
is.
Yeah, but yeah, it's,
Any way you look at it.
Well, see, they spent,
you know, you kind of like old Everett Dirksen used to say, a senator from Illinois, you know, he used to say, you know, we're talking about $1 million here and $1 million there and $1 million here. He said, pretty soon we're talking about real money. So that's kind of like, you know, what you're saying here is that it's real money any way you look at it.
I go fishing, the OG&E director down in Durant, for that area, he's my good fishing buddy. So we got some pretty good conversation here coming up.
Sure.
That's
right.
Pete, for example, Enid spends $1.5 million plus annually
Yeah.
on their electric bill. And, or is that electric? Gas, it was electric. Just electric.
That's electric, yeah.
And so, I mean, obviously, with the program, when you have that kind of expenditure, just take 10%.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like much, does it?
Yeah, sounds about
$150,000.
But I know I had a store in Tulsa back in the late '60s that I was all electric, hamburger place, soft serve ice cream, all electric. And the first 6 months, I got bills of like $385 a month. And after I'd been there about 6 months, I got a visit from DSO. They said, Mr. Massey, we've been using the wrong multiple on your meter. And said, it's been to your advantage, and we don't expect you to pay that back to us. But your bill's gonna be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,400 a month. So it was a tremendous amount of money.
Sure. I had my brother-in-law in Joplin had a printing company, and he started it out in his garage and became very successful, but he had a meter on his house, and he was running these printing presses in his garage and all this. And we lived in the Osho, and we practically had the same rate. And where my electric bill would run $50 a month, he up there with the comparable size house and all his printing equipment, well, he'd be paying $30 a month. So they would call him continually telling him that we're going to come out and do our periodic check on your meter. And he'd say, oh, I'm happy, forget about it. So he had that good meter for a long time, so sometimes it worked both ways.
I'm on REA at my home. Across the street was OG&E. OG&E's utility rate is 30% cheaper than mine.
And the REA? Well, it of course could be, due to the size of their establishment.
Also, I called them, and I know a lot of the directors, me being a public eye down there and everything. I told them, I said, check on mine. Come out and check the meter. They did. They just charged me $15 to check the meter.
Does REA buy their electricity from OG&E? Does REA buy their
Well,
electricity?
of course, they're making a profit, they have to make money.
Yeah, 30%. That's a lot.
But if you look at PSO, the 3 cities we looked at, the 2 that had franchises, Ada and Enid, they had the highest utility rates. And PSO, which was instead of a franchise with Okmulgee had negotiated annual contracts, had the lowest utility rates. And so, it's franchises versus annual and renewable contracts. If they know you're on the open market, and if they don't like the service that you're providing, you can switch any year. They get darn competitive fast. But if you're on a 10, 15, 25-year franchise, they don't even have to take care of you. Now, they'll buy you plants, they'll buy you trees, they'll line you down, and take you out. But they don't have to be serious about the utility rate structure. If you can negotiate it, it's amazing. And the same is true of street lighting.
Well, I think, when we look at long-term contracts, and we're talking about, 20 years, 25 years, this sort of thing, we become very concerned. And I think this was evident in Tulsa yesterday. The cable television company there has been operating on an annual renewable contract for the past 15 years, and everything's been great. Now they want to put in a new fiber optic system, and to expend the type of money that they're spending, they want a 20-year contract, that they would be there for 20 years. And, that's, you start thinking of 20 years, with just one company, it makes you think a little bit. And,
In regards to that, where it's on an annual basis, do they collect the franchise tax fee yet, or is that the way?
See, really, the reality of it is that franchise tax you're paying for, as customers, the city's not itself, but yet everyone who lives in the city is.
See, you pay,
Benefiting the citizens of your town more.
Well, not really. They're paying for it.
You
That's
pay-
what I mean, is they're getting the direct benefit out of having a year-to-year contract versus a franchise.
Exactly.
see, you and Benita, I just looked at your utility bills. And you pay on every utility bill, you pay a franchise fee.
2%.
And the thing that's interesting too on those is, if you look at them, and you take GRDA no one can touch it in the state for providing power at the rate they provide for. I mean, there's no comparison.
Now, the GRDA, it's a policy, they don't want to grow beyond a certain size too. But once they pass that, they're gonna be off of hydro primarily, they're gonna be on fossil fuel power. So that's gonna make their rates go up, so they keep themselves smaller and stay with that hydro power.
That's true, but they still have a certain growth rate as of now that they can take on more. And they've got their Wyoming coal contracts in for the next 10 years. They've offered one municipality I know a contract, or they were in position to, if they would receive it, to guarantee them a rate for the next 10 years, no increase.
Now, if you get involved in that before OMPA could be, you would have found a wide open market, they charge whatever price they want. When OMPA was formed, and forced all of them to drop those way.
I hate getting started because it's hard to stop, but Mike had mentioned that he was, a past city councilman. Well, he is from Bixby. And for those of you in the municipal area here know that they just went through quite a trial and tribulations of voting, on their power system. And the ramifications. So he has some don't agree with all of them, but he has some very fixed viewpoints on the utility companies. Anyways, is the bill computed correctly? Check that, because you might be surprised. And as Mike pointed out, you might find some savings there. And then look at it. What changes have to be made to qualify for a better rate? And again, this is talk to your utility representative there. Make them explain why you're on that rate. What can be done, to give you a better rate.
Charlie, you might mention one of those things too, that, for example, like Enid, and I don't know particulars on that, but that on every franchise has a free kilowatt, quote unquote, free kilowatt service, and that you use up or you lose if you don't use up. And then also, if you go over that, then you pay a penalty, and their franchise, Enid has that.
Yeah.
I don't think, like the city of Grant, I called OG&E and they sent a man to check my bills over. I don't know if I'm gonna get a fair shake. Is there a
check them over?
Is there outside vendors, a business type of work that we could hire that, and then we know it'd be an unbiased decision?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, as Mike says, there is a gentleman in Tulsa that does that type of work. But you can do that yourself. Do a spot check.
Oh, yeah?
And, pardon? Yeah. Now, you can do it, they're not all that difficult.
Not for y'all, but I mean for a layman like me, or somebody else.
No, they're not even that, and I'll show you here in a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's, if you can add,
You could add, there's a bunch of bucks here being spent
Yeah.
unnecessary.
I'm sure.
And with all cities.
Yeah. But we'll go into that a little bit. You'll find it's not quite that.
Investigation.
This is Public Service Company, Oklahoma. This is their rates that they have at the present time. They got 4 rates in residential. Yeah, that is not in your.
That's not in our
No, but if you wish, we'll make copies of these.
I'd like that.
Yes, I would.
I need one. Yeah, but this is very good information to have. In this, I just got this week, so this is their current, you know, they change it periodically, but this is their current. They've got 4 residential rate schedules. The first one is their limited use, where you use 400 kW a month or less. They have their closed residential, that's an old schedule that is not available to any additional customers. That's a schedule they've had. Then one of them that most of us are on is Schedule 140, which is your residential service, and that's your standard residential rate. They also have, PSO has the Good Sense residential service, and we'll look at a couple of those in a little bit to see, you know, just what the saving is if you have the Good Sense. If you have PSO, they will work with you too to try to get you on, but you have to ask. These guys don't come and give you anything. You have to keep asking them, you know, and demanding that you get the best thing that you're entitled to.
That 120, you can exceed it so many months out of the year, I think, not.
Right. Yeah, they
It's
have
primarily for elderly people, low income.
low income, that's right. Yeah, they don't use a lot of.
Yeah, don't have a lot of electrical stuff like freezers and air
Air
conditioners.
conditioners and all that sort of thing, that's right.
You have rate schedules for the different power companies throughout the state?
The only ones I have public service, I have OG&E, and then for gas, I have ONG. I do not have them for, we will, if you don't have them in your community, you're from Seminole, we can get them. You know,
I just
from
wondered
that.
if they were consistent throughout the state, like if OG&E charges basically the same as REA or PSO.
No, they're different. We can look at OG&E and public service, and they're not the same. Their rate schedule may be, their rate per kilowatt hour may be a little bit different, or their customer-related charge may be a little different. You know, they don't, if they all had exactly the same rate, you know, then there's not much competition there.
I was just wondering how would we know if we were being ripped off or
I can never figure that out. I'm overpaid, I've paid too much or.
But we can get hopefully we'll be able to help you on that.
Who do you talk to? Because I had a question for OG&E a year or 2 ago, and I never ever could figure out who to talk to give me a straight answer. And nobody was impolite, but I never got the answer. I took out an electrical stove and put in gas, and my electric usage went up, and that was the only change. There may be a valid reason, but
all I
I
can
think,
tell you, they have service representatives.
yeah, I couldn't figure out who to talk to.
Yeah, and best thing to do is to call them, tell them you want to speak to one of their service representatives.
Okay. Because
And
everybody
they will-
was perfectly nice.
And they will be, you know, that's what they are there for,
Yeah.
is to help you on those sort of things.
Okay.
If we look at our large commercial and industrial pricing schedules, that gets into, you know, those are very large installations. Probably most of you would come into this small commercial and industrial pricing schedules where you're into your I looked at like I said, Benita's, and I think they were, I think 645 was the rate schedule. I just looked at one of your bills in your submittal back there. It seemed like it was 645 was the rate schedule.
Our station is 675.
675, okay. This one,
City Hall is 655.
655. Well, I knew it had a 5 in it. Of course, I'm pretty safe when Okay, so you got a 675 for the fire station and a 655, which is a 5 non-demand. Secondary voltage is over 8,000 kW per month. Okay, there, probably ought to look and see why you can't, what do you have to do to get into that 555? And there is quite a significant difference in those two rate schedules. But look at that's what we want to do, what we want to point out to you today. Look at those rate schedules. This will give you, if you have public service, and like I said, I have OG&E that we can make copies of you for. But
I suspect the total electric is basically what that 4,000 is involved.
You say you do have an OG&E? I'd like to give them a look for you.
okay. They were not, I've got about 5 or 6 rate schedules. And we'll look at them and we'll make copies of those. They are not as efficient as public service. They don't have them all itemized, like this. But we do have several of those copies.
Charles, one thing that just to tell them is don't be, I know it's a subject that normally don't deal with, don't know that much about, but don't be intimidated or worry about how dumb the question is. Because the bottom line is, if you hit a serious butt, you'll be amazed how dumb they can get. Well, I'm not really sure on that. I'll get back to you. Let me check. So no matter how stupid this is on all your different buildings, well, why is this? Why am I charged this on this facility? Now I'm being charged this over here. What's the reason? It's interesting the answers you get.
One thing that we found with Kingman was you have to ask to get on their program where they're updating their system, putting in these new lights for your street lights. And they'll, like there, 10% each year, they would do 10% of those lights redone. When they did that, then they reduced the bill by a certain percent too, when they calculated. But I don't think they'll do that for the city unless the city requests it, because they have so many requests that they can't do the whole system one time. They have to just take so many, and they're budgeting from year to year like cities. So you need to get on there to get included.
Now, again, they're not going to do anything for you unless you ask.
Unless you have a manager that's
They've got,
really
we found,
your town.
we'll talk about later about street lights, but we found street lights that they were being charged for. Down in was Okmulgee, wasn't it? It had, one of them, had a street light that they were paying a fee on. It hadn't been there.
Oh,
But you can say, well, did they know, the power company know it wasn't there? Well, you don't know.
I know they
But
started that.
they're still collecting for it, for years and years.
They started that about 2 years before I went there, and when it first started, it was like something over $26,000 for that light. And when I left there, it was like $19,000. And they had added some lights over those years, street lights.
The city of Eden pays $543,000 a year in street lights. They only pay $370 or something like it. It's in that little application for wastewater.
It's something
treatment facility.
surprisingly out of your utility bills or your pricing for streetlights is going to run a tremendous. It's going to run 20% or better of your bill, and that's a lot of money for street lighting, this sort of thing. Okay.
After when you look back at the franchise fee you get from them, and you compare it to what you're paying you back for your street lighting, which is quite a bit.
Well, one thing I noticed in meeting with every one of them is on the 3 cities in the past, and it's true, I don't believe that any utility companies, I don't even believe they're thinking that they figure out ways to get to people. I don't believe that. They're just a business. They've got their own vested interests. They've got their own perspective on things. And the way those are categorized and the way those happen is over a period of years. And some of those you'll find that a city manager 15 years ago said, put me on this rate structure. And they left it there. Now, it will be to their advantage. And he didn't ask. And it's a good deal for them. I mean, so it's like selling, I'd like to sell you toothpicks for the rest of my life. Or Velcro. Or buttons. Hey, I'm in business. So you said you wanted those buttons, so I sent it to you, and they got very defensive on street lighting. Now, wait a minute, now, we haven't put the street lights in, you haven't requested. I mean, before the city manager said, oh, yeah, we understand that. We only put them up if you request them, that's true. I mean, they don't tell you that's the worst thing you can do to yourself, but you put in street lights, I mean, it's a gold mine for them in terms of money. I mean, they don't tell you the other side of the coin, they take for granted that you've got the knowledge to look at it yourself, they just provide the service. I think that's.
We got all new street lighting in that, and I got it through the St. John's.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
And I like that, because we got street lights down there. I could probably take down 40% of them.
That's right.
Got street lights 75 feet apart, well, that don't make no common sense.
That's something I always told them, that, you know, to get this put up is easy, but you must approve it, because I'm not gonna approve it, because to take it down, Mister, you've got a battle on your hands. So if you're gonna do it, you better think about it before you put it up.
They had, in Eden, their street lighting is so good or bad, whichever you want to think about it. They said that they had wrecks, they'd had accidents from people leaving, you know, the community center down there, and it was so bright, they didn't even turn their lights on. And pretty soon they drive out in the dark neighborhood, you know, run into a tree or something.
There's the us that we had our own electrical system. And the problem we get into is somebody will call and say, we want a security light. And they want to put on their alley, because a lot of people park in the alleys and, you know, coming in. They want on their alley. All right, that family leaves there, and the light stays up. And then somebody forgets to get it turned off, and the next thing you know, it's a city-owned light. It's one of their street lights. It's no longer a security light that somebody pays you $7.50 a month for, all of a sudden it's free grants. You can drive that town, you can see them all over the alleys and everywhere where the street lights are. They're just over. That's what I was saying, you gotta be very cautious, because once it's there, in that street, 5 and 2.
Well, and they're probably, a lot of them are mercury vapor, the worst.
That's right, the worst
And
now.
Okmulgee has passed a resolution that is, oh, you know, there's nothing to do street light. In fact, we've already passed a resolution on buying one street light per city block. We're taking the initiative on this program. So I walk outside, and right there in front of City Hall, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The next block, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The next block, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I go back in, come outside with me. Well, yeah, I know. In fact, it's what you said. The political nature of it is how do you tell merchants you're pulling out street lights? And boy, they take me to see they voted for it, they're addressed in public issue, and they've not, in reality, not done one thing about it. They pay $100,000 a year in street lights.
And also, they do have different rate schedules, you know, for your street lighting, for the pumping, and this sort of thing. We'll get into those later when we're talking about the pumping and this sort of thing. This is the residential, the rate schedule 140. And here's something interesting here is, you know, and this is in all of their contracts. See, this is 12 consecutive months. You agree upon a rate schedule, that sucker's locked in there for 12 months. That's according to their rate schedule here. So you want to, you know, when you sit down with them, renegotiate it if they can, by make sure you're getting the right one, because, you know, you're signing on to something here for 12 months. It goes on, it gives you the voltage, and you get down here, prices, customer charge. That's your $675 a month. Now you get into on peak and off peak. This is what I was talking about a while ago. Those are the on peak season should be the company's billing period of June through September, and of course the off peak is, you know, from October through May. So you do have on peak, off peak season here. Your on peak season, and this is what I'm talking about, your sliding scale. You pay 6,447 cents per kilowatt hour for the first 1,000 kilowatts, and then a different 7.147 for the additional, all additional kilowatt hours. This is a little bit different.
I think the big thing there to notice is, you see when you're on your on-peak season,
Uh-huh.
You start out cheaper, you go higher.
That's right.
When you're on your off-peak season, you start out higher and you get cheaper.
You get cheaper, sure. You know the reason, you can see the reason for that.
Another thing they don't tell you, there's a $25 charge every time they turn you off and on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that was,
You move or
yeah,
anything.
that's on, you notice this is page 1 of 2, and then I didn't run the second page of it, that's identifying.
They have a charge.
Oh, yeah. But let's look, now this is the good sense. This is their good sense. Here we're looking at, on peak, we're looking at 6.343, and here we had 6.447. So there's a definite savings there. We're going from 7.043 up to 7.147. So that's and then if you look, put that there, if you can look at the, well, I don't, if you look at the off season, you know, we got 5.4, and here on their on the good sense program, 5.4 versus 6 cents here, 384 to 344. So it does, you know, it does give you some benefits on that thing. Just looking at some of these other.
But it takes some pretty good qualifications to get there.
Yes, they will come out. Now they will come out and do an audit of your, you know, of your residence.
That's another $25.
Tell you, well, they tell you, yeah, tell you
All these
what.
charges they do.
Yeah. This is, now we're getting into the commercial and industrial, and you notice our customer charge is, you know, is up to $22. Our energy charge, now we have a three ratchet scale, 2,500, 2,500, and then for all additional. This was very interesting in that.
And another thing that's not shown on there is that 2 or 3% franchise fee, that's tacked on top.
Yes. Now, I just showed you that residential scale. This was on the back, it's a little bit out of sequence here. But this is on the back of my last, or one of my utility bills. I just reached over the file and pulled it out. You notice on the copy of the Schedule 140, which is right here, they've got the 675. Now, I pay so much, you know, for the first 1,000 kW, and then, in other words, they've got it broken down, and then all over 1,000 kW, why I pay, you know, I pay so much more. And I thought that was pretty interesting, and I was going to see where. Okay, well that adds up to the same thing that I have on the bill. Or I was just looking at that and I thought that, but they do put this on the back of your utility bill periodically, so that I can flip it over. And this is on just a residential bill here. I can flip it over and check and see, make sure that you know that it is correct. This is the utility bill, and you notice they have the fuel cost adjustment up here. And you notice that little minus? Well, that is deducting. In other words, they deduct that from each kW in computing the bill. Now, if there's no plus up there, if there's nothing, then they add it to your bill. So we are getting on our fuel cost up there. I do get a. I'm glad I pulled out the right one. At least it shows that my wife paid the bill anyway. So. I hate to put one up here and says delinquent, but they will tell you over here. This is your schedule you're on, 140, They give you the meter readings when they were taken. Your meter reading, come over here, we used 1967 kW. The amount was $90.60. I did, and you'll notice here, we are on just a constant pay. In other words, we just pay, so much, we pay $97 every month, and this averages out so that, we fluctuate up and down. And that's, my wife likes that.
Does OG&E call theirs a fuel cost adjustment also? So they haven't gone to power cost adjustment, which includes other things than fuel.
No, I've got it back in my briefcase or others, but I think they call it.
Mine are still called, I don't know what you're still called fuel adjustment.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is in the Bixby area, at the same time PSO had a negative fuel adjustment per kilowatt to the entire summer months, REA in our area had the same negative fuel cost from OG&E had a positive and add the same period of fuel adjustment cost the entire summer period. There's some positive and everybody else was negative. Now, of course, there's all kinds of way ratios to justify that.
They've got to go back then and look at what they paid for that power that they're selling to you for that 6 point, whatever it is.
Yeah. But again, it is something, at least it's a service they make. It says other prices, and you'll notice when I lay that over, they did have different rate schedules there. It says they may be available to you or also included. But again, you have to go down and talk to them or have them come out and talk to you. They're not just going to do that automatically.
Well, one that PSO and some, I don't know if OG&E has that, I know PSO does, and that's your monthly average.
Uh-huh.
And where you can go on that rate structure where they just average your bills, you can have constant over based on last year. But I strongly do not recommend that. Everyone I know that's done that balancing monthly, you don't associate with the times of the season and the way you use electricity. And everyone I know that's done that, your utility bills have gone up substantially because.
Well, but I'm going to disagree with that because when ours comes in, we look at, at the usage, to see this what we're doing. Now, it may, just because I'm orientated that way.
It just depends on yourself.
I'm
not for it, but sorry.
This may be one of those dumb questions, but
Okay.
how much choice does one have, either municipality or personal, as to what utility company you deal with? I was under the understanding that one utility company serves this area and choices were not possible.
Well, that's true.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're not really comparing REA, or we're
No.
just learning how to, okay,
You're just learning how to deal with
okay,
whomever
got
you
it,
have.
got it. I was
And this surprised me because we went to Pennsylvania. We had some friends in a community north of Pittsburgh called Natrona Heights. And we were talking to them one night, and they said, boy, they were really upset with their gas company. And said they thought they were too high, so they just changed. And I said, what do you mean, you changed gas companies? And they said, that's right.
to propane.
No, and in talking, so we got to really, this interested me. They had 3 natural gas companies in that one town. And they could change to whomever they wanted. And the gas companies, of course, they paid each other. One of them owned the distribution service, and they paid, to use the service and this sort of thing. But it was fantastic. I said, well, that's great.
There's
How would I like
that
to?
going on here now between utilities.
That's right. I was gonna say, there are instances where you can change, like Claremore just recently was currently provided by GRDA and PSO was promoting Hamlet. Because there is a corporation that has made that wheeling power.
But that's not within the same community, is it?
Well,
I mean, you go one or the other.
It can
It can
occur.
occur under state law now.
Right, because see, Bixby, for example, has REC, OG&E, and PSO providing power to it.
Even though you may have a franchise with PSO, for instance. They get there to the other.
But are they, do you have your option as to whoever you want to go to?
If we
If there's lines
conduct
available.
the intelligence to the people that voted against the franchise, yes.
Well, then you didn't answer my question.
If they're,
Now, okay.
if they're available to the service, if they can get to that service, they can take it.
I know down in the Seminole area, if you have OG&E on one side of the road and REA on the other side, the customers can't switch over to them.
You can't say, hey, I'd like to have REA.
Right.
You can't switch over on water.
The only way you can do it is if you sell your home, and they're out, what, 90 days, and you come back.
I know a lot of
That's the way
times,
they do it.
a lot of times utility companies have a kind of unspoken agreement that they don't have wars going after each other's territory. You know, for example, in the Tulsa area, OG&E cannot compete in industrial rates. PSO will provide them and beat them every time on industrial rates. I mean, they just blow the doors off. And we had a major facility come in, Campbell Park, to our area. It's a major industrial client. And OG&E took them in corporate jet, flew them around, and had all their big corporate people talk to them, line them down, and take them all over. PSO just sent out their local, regional rep. He sat down, pulled out the registration, discussed it with them. I mean, they didn't see Martin Fay, no one from the board, no one. He just showed up like a typical customer. And PSO provides the power. OG&E could compete on industrial base.
This is one of, somebody had talked earlier about, that's what I was looking for. This is on one of their pumping schedules. Like you'll notice here, it said that the monthly maximum KW and the monthly maximum kilovolt amps, the kVAR, it's your reactive, this one right here, this one, are based on 30-minute integrated periods. So that's, your demand is being based upon that 30-minute period as I was talking about. These prices are based upon the customer's monthly maximum kVAR, your reactive power right here, being no more than 30% of the maximum monthly KW rating. So that's how they're establishing their power factor, power factor requirements right there. And if you do that, somebody said, is that real severe? Well, for customers whose monthly KVR, maximum KVR requirements are more than 30%, shall be increased by 20 cents per month for each KVAR above that 30%. And that can get you into some monies. So there are, you just need to look at each one of your utility rate schedules to determine, what kind of requirements that you do have. I was going to, this is an OG&E schedule. See, I forget 675. This is a residential schedule. This is a water pumping rate schedule. Okay, I didn't make a copy of the residential, but you can see they put they're a little different. They've got their charge, and then just all your KWH, they just charge you so much per month. So on this particular one, they have no penalty, power factor penalty. The thing that we really want to point out is there are a lot of rate schedules out there, as we just pointed out, and you have a copy of them. Look at them, see what one is the best for you. We do have several. This is ONG, which is a natural gas. This one. This is a standard residential, commercial. This is the schedule that we're on. It says commercial up there, but that's the one that we're on. But here again, see, they have the same type of thing. They're charging you for your first 100 CFH, your flat rate. In other words, you're going to pay that regardless. And then they come up with your 2.9 MCF your 7, so they've got about, you know, for the, right in here, well, that's a very constant charge. But they do have the same type of scale that you have on the other. This is the gas bill. They call it the purchased gas adjustment. You know, somebody asked me, you know, the name of that a while ago, but that's purchased gas adjustment, and that is 0.171 per MCF credit. That, again, that you get on your, you know, you get on your utility bill. They don't identify, ONG doesn't, you know, as to, right here, your residential rate is the 101. They do, I think this is kind of interesting, they do put down a comparative usage, you know, for this year versus last year, so that if you just look at your bill, you can see, and you kind of see what you're doing. Last year we used 4.3. In April, our gas usage was quite a bit less. Here's a little bit more. So kind of interesting to see. You know, you can plot your own curves and see what you're doing there.
That's just a good psychological thing, to get your rates so close as you can, show up that credit more often when you do a plus, when you get those rates approved on the corporation commission.
Sure.
It's a lot nicer to look at your bill and see a minus on it
Yeah.
than to see a plus.
Yeah, that's right. Like I said, it's psychological.
That's good for the corporation members.
Sure.
They don't get all that argument at them, and they say, well, we've only done it. It's been reduced every month since we've been in office.
And I've told my wife, we have the rate schedule at home on these, and about every third bill, what she does, she sits over there at her desk at her little computer, you know, and she adds these, goes through all these things, and of course, usually the minute she figures one, I hear an outburst over there, and you know, about this crooks and all that, and I go over and I say, well, wait a minute, you didn't do this, you know. So, but anyway, she keeps them honest, and it really takes very little effort to do that. Yeah, let's take a break, and you know, like I said, if anybody has any questions, wants to go over this stuff in any more detail today, or you know, tonight, or whenever. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and reconvene. One thing I just mentioned to Charlie, and we'll just briefly touch on too, it deals with what you're charged for is your meter can charge. You're charged for that can, the meter, you're charged monthly for a meter to set there. And for example, on Okmulgee, they were charged $200 and some on a ballpark with 0 kilowatts. And they just went, wait a minute, I'm charged for electricity. I didn't use any. Why are you charging me? And they weren't even aware, because the billing department, you know, the city clerk pays the bills. But when we brought it to their attention, they said, well, why? They didn't even understand. They didn't know that in some instances. And you're charged, for example, in Enid, I think there's a base for OG&E of like $12.53 a month per meter. And they have Alfalfa Electric, and they have a base charge of, Ed, do you remember what that was? $23, $34? It was like, it was
I don't remember, it's
like twice as much. It was real high
over twice what.
of what OG&E is. And plus their kilowatt rate service was substantially higher. I mean, like twice the kilowatt service rate structure. And when you have over 200 wells, and that's your municipal pumping source for water, and for some reason someone made the decision to base load with Alfalfa Electric, your base load on water production, just by simply pointing out to them, and the person that was internally, that's what we can do for you too. When you have these political situations, this one person there, Steve Brooks, kept bringing us to people's attention, and somehow it just kept disappearing. And he said, hey, if we'll base load with OG&E and only on our peak demand go to Alfalfa, we can save substantial dollars. I mean, this is no credit to us, honestly. Other than the fact that we're the political vehicle, we come in and point the factors and the fingers, and you can hate our guts when we walk away from your town, and they can say, well, you know, they're the, you know, with the utility company, We don't want to make enemies, you don't want to make enemies, because they are a necessary part of the community, and they're a beneficial part of the community. So we can come in and play the bad guys when we walk away and then go, those jerks. You know, they cost us this account. Well, when we left, Alfalfa Electric's no longer the base load, and they say they're claiming over $70,000 savings already this year. And it's changing from Alfalfa Electric to OG&E. I mean, and that, you talk about low cost, no cost, that's just an administrative decision. So there's several things like that that do come open. For example, they had meters on, well, they had one meter that'd been there 17 years on an account as a real low meter, and no one knew what it was for. They've been paying the bill for 17 years, and in fact, OG&E cannot even tell them what it was for. So we went on the quest for the Holy Grail, myself and this other person, and we found it. It was down a dirt road on the backside of a golf course on the edge of town, and it was one security light with a drinking fountain. On the backside, what had happened, one of the city managers of past eons ago, because no one, I guarantee you, no one will lay claim to this and say, oh, I did that. He liked to play golf, and he got hot, and there was no drinking fountain in the back nine. And so we had him put a drinking fountain out there, and he played, and even time they put a light out there. And this thing has been, you know, they've been paying bills on it, and all they had to do is tie it to another line and get rid of the $12.53 a month. We went out to the airport, and within a 1 block area, there was like 7 meters. You've got one for street lighting. At the end of the parking lot, you have one for jet fuel storage. At this end, you have for the crash building. Across the street for the terminal building, you have another meter. Next door, you have a utility building, another meter. Next door to that, you have an airport hangar with another meter. Next door to that, you have an airport hangar with another meter. Next door to that, you have, see the picture? $12.53 a month for every one of those. It's airport account. I mean, unless you have to have an accounting system, so take 7 times $12.53 a month times 12 months out of the year, you just go, for what? For the privilege? I know, I like them. I mean, they are cute. You put them in front of their building, you can put smiley faces on them, but are they worth that? All they are there is to measure. So we recommend that you look at ways that you can group up. Now, there's accountability, accounting systems, ballparks versus, you know, administrative building versus maintenance. So you need to have meters for certain accounting situations, but it is something to think about that we point out to them, and as we will to you.
You know, another thing, a lot of people, particularly out in residential areas, don't understand, you have a lot of line loss between that meter and the house. And REA specifically likes to put their meter out on a pole as close as they can get to their lines. And then you run to it, you've got that line loss to your house that costs you also. And if you have, say, like you're talking about, 4 different meter loops coming in on an airport and they're going underground into the hangar or something, you've got all that line loss there on 4 of them. If you can consolidate it on one and get as close to your base as you need, you can cut down line loss on that.
Right. One other thing you just brought to mind, I will say, that deals with this area on franchise agreements. And I've always said, that's my famous quote, there is no tooth fairy, there is no Santa Claus, and you do get what you pay for. City of Enid, everyone with a franchise agreement, utility companies like to give you free kilowatt service. You know, X amount of free kilowatts. Well, there is no such thing. And what happens is it makes people who are not in tune to it or sensitive to it make bad judgments. For example, if you have a piece of pie and you're consuming 100,000 kilowatts of service and you get 25%, it's not that high, but or 10%, whatever you want to pull out of the air, free kilowatt service. You know, so you've got a piece here that's theoretically free. Well, the City of Enid, because it was free kilowatt, they had the airport terminal, which is total electric, including the grill and kitchen, the fryers, your everything was total electric. Well, total electric, they had natural gas. In fact, they had ONG on the Citizens Advisory Committee and Oklahoma Natural Gas. And they said, well, we asked them, why did you have total electric facility out there? Well, it's free kilowatt service. And OG&E rep said, yeah. Says, I'd like to know how you're going to save energy when it's free. There's nothing you can do out there. And the ONG guy says, well, why? I want to know why you don't use gas. And they said, well, it's not available. He said, if you'll give me a load, gas will be available. I'll bring gas to you. And that's true, if you give them a load, they'll bring gas to you. If they can justify it, they can do it. And what I'm saying here is, that sounds real good, but it makes you waste energy. Because in reality, your citizens are paying for it through the franchise agreement. Now, you take that 25%, how can you increase on it? Let's say, for example, you reduce your kilowatts, to 80,000, and you get 25% of that franchise. It's semantics, but thinking you're getting something free, you have a tendency to use more energy. You have a tendency, like they've made airport account, they said, well, we'll just make the entire airport accounting where we'll use our free kilowatt service. And since it's free, it doesn't cost us anything. I mean, they just set themselves up. And another thing, there is no, usually in municipalities, and this is not dealing with that, but it's a side byproduct of that, there is no accountability typically on energy budgets through department heads. And that's something I strongly push throughout the seminars to, if you're not responsible for it, you're not going to take care of it. You're a department head, you're responsible for the parks, you're responsible for maintenance, you're responsible for whatever your area of expertise is. You cover your you-know-what and you do the best you can do. Those areas that you're not responsible for and you've all looked at other people's over the fence, so to speak, go, gee, Christmas. Well, that's their problem. Well, no department head's responsible for energy typically. Now, some are getting better and some cities are starting to change that. But as a general rule, a lot of municipalities, there is no one responsible. You got the city clerk paying the bills. Well, therefore, who's accountable? Who knows when the water's being turned on, turned off? Most of the cities we've been in don't even meter their water usage. So if no one's accountable, no department head's accountable, I'd like to see every department head be responsible for his own energy consumption within his department of whatever it is, like Parks and Recreation, and it's a line item in the budget. Because like in the city of Enid, they like to play golf out there. A lot of them like to play golf. And don't mess the golf, water all we want, But, that's your decision, but it sets you up for just a very wasteful situation. The next subject to discuss is the building envelope. We've talked on it quite a bit already, so I'm going to not hit it too heavy, but try and deal with it as much as I can. Some of this, it starts on page 69 under the tab of the building energy systems. Deals with here, we've already dealt with it quite a bit on the type of construction. New construction today is a better quality in terms of environmental or energy issues as opposed to old construction. I'm not saying it's better in terms of longevity, but it is better in terms of energy sensitivity. Obviously, a total cast stone or granite or marble building is a lot better than metal studs, sheetrock, and wood siding, in terms of quality and longevity. But in terms of energy, it's not. Obviously, the insulation, the cavities to put insulation is better, going to be more energy efficient. So new constructions are typically better, but there's things you can do to the old construction that can help change that and help make them more efficient. Maintenance, and I'll go through that here with this section. One of the things to keep in mind, this goes back for new design and new type of issues for new construction. To keep in mind, or additions, alterations. The most efficient form, you get efficiency through form. The most efficient form is a circle. Well, we don't build too many total round eggs to live in. There's been a few eggheads I work with, and I've been accused of being an egghead, but that's the most efficient. The next is a square, and then your rectangle. And what that has to do with is volume, just volumetrics and exposure of exterior and corners. You take this area compared to look at your surface area. just compare the surface area. You have less surface area in the same volume of a sphere, less surface area in the same volume of a square than you do a rectangular. And a rectangle, you have less as compared to something like this. The more complex the shapes, the more exposure of surface area. That's why, for example, in a house, and it's not quite true in commercial, but on a house, for example, you can almost build that space in for the same cost, because you've already paid for this. It's just right there. You subtract the footing cost, your stem wall cost, your stem wall cost. You are adding in your slab cost, you are adding in your roof cost and some finishes, but you can virtually build in that square for what that cutout cost. And plus that cutout cost, if that's to the north, it's a real strong trap area for winds, especially if that's an entry courtyard. You'll see a lot of buildings with a recessed area. It calls attention to it. It's a focal point, true, but also traps wind, also traps snow. So there's efficiency through shape and design that can save or cost you energy. Insulation, the more the better to a point. There's a recommended table in there, and this table, by the way, is from 1981. Currently in a home, there's the energy standards too for commercial, industrial, and that's set by your codes, but your codes that everyone typically will design to meet is absolute minimum standards, absolute minimum requirements. It's worse, if not it's worse than the equipment. Buying the lowest grade you can buy, because you're doing your entire building and you can change your equipment out a lot faster than change your entire building out. But typically buildings are designed to the lowest standard. Look at a metal building, for example. I mean, how many metal buildings do you know, and I'm picking on metal building manufacturers because they have their place and purpose, but how many of them are high efficiency, well designed, you know, that they're garages. So you can make them efficient and you can add more insulation, but a lot of them are not. It varies. Most of the insulation that we saw, for example, Ada ended in Okmulgee, 80% of the facilities had none in the walls, 0, because of the age which they were built. And the majority of them had less than an R10 for the roof. Most of them were like an R4. Some of them had 0. We were in a lot of facilities that had no insulation in the roof whatsoever. The next grade above 0 that a lot of them think you can do, and Ed can touch on this one, is you have the building, structure, and this was a hot thing to do, a quick retrofit. Everybody's going around selling it. And then here's your ceiling. They come in here and this is your building, your walls are right here. And I'll have your insulation up here on the built-up roof, because it does cost more per square foot to put your insulation here than lay in bats and blow in. So they come in and put bats right here. But this is your return air plenum. Eddie, you might touch on that, what that does to you. You know, the problems with your, because instead of, this is non-conditioned space now, versus if this was insulation here, this is conditioned space in terms of thermal protection. So every bit of air that goes into your plenum doesn't have the insulation to protect it. Plus, every one of your ceiling tiles, you have leakage around all your tiles. It leaks tremendously, you know, into the same plenum. The other thing too is, in terms of standards, this is not acceptable by code, and it's not acceptable really for health reasons as well. As those are airborne fibers. That's a time bomb waiting for a lawsuit. When you have exposed bats in a plenum, it's not allowable by code anymore, and for various reasons. If you have them in your plenums, they have to be plenum rated bats. And fire retardant, smoke retardant development, they have to have certain standards where typical laying bats do not meet those standards. There's several research things on airborne fibers, fiberglass fibers, that are detrimental to your health, long-term exposure. Well, if that's a return area, you're circulating, I can guarantee you, with your dust particles, you've got a percentage of airborne fibers in your system being circulated throughout the building. Granted, having insulation there is better than none. It's better than having it like we found with very little up here, no question. But it's better if it had been put at where it should have been all along. It varies quite a bit, but anymore it's not hard at all to get an R19, an overall R19 on commercial structure, depending on what you want to build it out of. I mean, there's all different types, but anything less than that to me is not very good design at this point. In fact, I would recommend more than that, but it depends on the design and the configuration, how tall your parapets are, and what you're using for insulation. But you can achieve that very easily. And in fact, a person ought to have not less than R19 or say a composite wall of an R25 is easy to meet, and that's 6-inch studs via wood or metal studs with sheetrock on the inside and brick veneer on the exterior with the airspace is easily R25. So typically the old ones were built with brick, a cavity space, and brick, and that's the way they were laid up. And that was your entire wall with just a space here. And that's not very good at all. In fact, that's the way the City Hall in Enid's built part of it.
About what year would that have changed to be more energy efficient? Approximately.
Well, some of them are still building that way.
Okay.
Typically where it came about was mid-70s.
Okay.
Some of the people were a little far thinking. You'll find some buildings that were early 70s that already made some changes, but they're few and far between. And you'll find some buildings in the 80s and late 80s are still building with what's called a double width brick construction. Well, another one is the same thing, it's concrete block. You know, it has its place and purpose in commercial buildings. They're all just two blocks in a cross section. You've got an 8-inch or a 10-inch or a 12-inch or a 6-inch or a 4-inch, whatever. Typically they're 8-inch, most common. And you've got the mass, but the insulation value of this with rock wool or vermiculite or perlite, or there's a new product on the market called core fill we'll get into later. Typically that's like an R4, I believe, isn't it, Ed? R4, R6?
With vermiculite, it's 5.8.
Okay.
And
12-inch blocks.
right, you got your mass, but it's been totally bombarded on the exterior all the time, surface area with whatever the temperatures are. You get a 6-inch stud and brick veneer, stone veneer, typically the brick, and that combined will be like an R25. But this is like an R5.5. This is load bearing, but you can run steel pipe columns hidden inside there.
Make that load bearing too.
Yep, you can make that load bearing too, metal studs. So,
Okay, if a 2x6 is 25, or what's a 2?
about an R15 combined. Well, the actual insulation here is like an R19, and the 2x4 is R11. But you can supplement that, for example, there's sheathing materials here that you can use, and then your mass. The overall combined depends on what you do, R22, R25, or R15, R17, something in there with the 2x4.
I built several homes in my, and on the inside I just put disclaim.
That's a good thing
I
to
tell
do.
you what, that was the best money I ever spent, especially out west.
That's right.
Don't wait to talk.
That's what we're going to talk on coming up is infiltration, and it is tremendous impact that it can do for you. For insulation, on the page 72, and this is, the codes came out with this. Your perimeter, what's called perimeter insulation on your floor slabs, and what that gets into is what I touched on earlier, I call thermal nosebleed. You've got a typical footing, and let's call it stem wall slab configuration. They're monolithic, non-monolithic, whatever. And then you've got your wall coming up here with your whatever your bottom member is, and okay. And then on a house, and it's true on commercial, you still have this type of configuration. They call them grade beams and grade beam and pier and different terminology for what it is, but for sake of argument, Then they'll come out here and set their brick on your footing. Problem that you have is right through here, around that perimeter, is you've got your mass, you've got no protection, and they've done research and computer analysis where this outside perimeter gets substantially colder than your interior because you're more stable out here. Your ducts are under the floor slab, not on commercial necessarily that much. Step worse than this is a frame home. Frame home's got your siding stops here, and then you just backfill. Well, it's got this being beat right there. And it'll change, and one of the things we uncovered in Los Alamos, the earth temperatures, they say, well, you get down to frost line. Well, that's true, 18 inches, 2 feet in Oklahoma's frost line. But your temperature will change as deep as 10 feet. It's one of the things in Los Alamos. Now, it's not necessarily a freezing condition, but again, what if you're 38, 3 feet down? Well, 38 degrees earth temperature is going to impact this structure 3 feet down. You know, those may not be the exact numbers, but so what they've done is they've come up with minimum code requirements, and what they used to require is insulation right here on the perimeter of the slab. But really, what do that do? Nothing. The best place to put it is if you use brick veneer construction. Right here. Right there in the cavity, 1 inch cavity. And that's what this talks about, the theories of that. If you've got a crawl space, the way you can lay bats and blankets around the perimeter versus against the bottom. One thing that's better than this, it's the best of both worlds and it's more expensive construction, is to go back to your concrete block, if you have concrete block. Use this new product they called Chlorophyll. It's a urethane, and it's not a foam, it's not the formaldehyde, it's a rigid, dense material, kind of like extruded polystyrene or Dow Corning blue board, not beadboard. If you're all familiar with beadboard, it crumbles, it's out of little bitty particles. Well, extruded polystyrene is melted styrofoam extruded out. So it's a lot more dense, it's a lot better quality. Well, this is similar to that, but not as rigid. And it fills these cores, and it gets you a lot higher value, like an R11. You can get them R11, I think you can get them R15 or something like that. Then you come over on the outside, if you like stucco. And there's different products on the market that you can put an R10 right there. And you've got this entire mass insulated on the inside of your building. So, I mean, there's several combinations. And
What are your metal studs like in comparison to wood studs on that?
well, the wood's cheaper generally, but it's a function of your codes only allow so much square feet with wood studs without firewalls, party walls, and wood separation and fire retardant materials. So typically you end up with metal studs in commercial work just because of the limitations of your fire codes.
Well, does it have that